Hashtag the moment everything changed. Commander Sarah Martinez had always known she was different. Not because she was a woman in the Navy SEALs, though that certainly set her apart, but because she carried herself with a quiet confidence that made even the most seasoned warriors take notice. At 32, she had earned every stripe, every medal, and every scar that decorated her record. Her dark hair was always pulled back in a regulation bun, and her brown eyes held the kind of intensity that came from years of making life-or-death decisions in the world's most dangerous places. The Pentagon's war room buzzed with nervous energy that Tuesday morning in March. The massive oval table was surrounded by some of the military's highest-ranking officials, their uniforms crisp and their faces grave. Admiral James Morrison, a man whose reputation preceded him into every room, sat at the head of the table reviewing classified documents. His silver hair caught the fluorescent lights as he studied satellite images of a terrorist compound in Syria. Sarah entered the room with measured steps, her combat boots silent against the polished floor. She had been called in for her expertise on a particularly dangerous mission that required someone with her unique skill set. The rescue of 3 American hostages from a heavily fortified compound was no ordinary operation, and her team had been specifically requested for the job. Commander Martinez, Admiral Morrison acknowledged without looking up from his papers. "Take a seat. We'll begin the briefing shortly." Sarah nodded and found an empty chair near the middle of the table. She noticed the sideways glances from some of the other officers, a mixture of curiosity and skepticism that she had grown accustomed to over the years. Being one of the few women to successfully complete SEAL training meant she was constantly proving herself, even in rooms where her reputation should have spoken for itself. The briefing began with intelligence reports and satellite footage. The hostages had been captured 3 weeks earlier while working for a humanitarian organization in Damascus. The terrorists holding them were demanding the release of high-value prisoners in exchange for the Americans' lives. Negotiations had stalled, and time was running out. "The compound is heavily defended," explained Colonel Peters, pointing to various locations on the projected map. "Multiple entry points, armed guards, and civilian shields make this an extremely complex operation. We need someone who can get in undetected and extract the targets without causing a diplomatic incident." Admiral Morrison finally looked up from his papers and fixed his gaze on Sarah. "Commander Martinez, your team completed a similar operation in Afghanistan last year. What's your assessment?" Sarah stood up and studied the intelligence photos carefully. Her mind raced through possible scenarios and extraction routes. The compound was indeed challenging, but she had faced worse odds before. "Sir, with the right approach and timing, it's doable. We'll need a diversion team and precise coordination with air support. The biggest challenge will be identifying the exact location of the hostages within the compound." "How long would you need to prepare?" Morrison asked. 48 hours for planning and team preparation, sir. We can be ready for insertion by Thursday night." A younger officer, Lieutenant Commander Jackson, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Sarah had noticed him earlier, recognizing him as someone who had graduated from the Naval Academy just a few years ago. He was part of the new generation of officers who had grown up hearing stories about female SEALs but had never actually worked with one. "Commander," Jackson interrupted, his voice carrying a hint of condescension that made several heads turn. "With all due respect to your experience, don't you think this mission might be a bit above your pay grade? I mean, we're talking about a high-risk operation with international implications. Maybe we should consider someone with more traditional qualifications for this level of responsibility." The room fell silent. Sarah felt the familiar surge of frustration that came with these moments, but her expression remained perfectly composed. She had learned long ago that reacting emotionally to such comments only reinforced the stereotypes she was fighting against. Admiral Morrison's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He had worked with Sarah before and knew exactly what she was capable of. "Lieutenant Commander Jackson," he said slowly, "perhaps you're not familiar with Commander Martinez's record. She has successfully completed more high-risk extractions than most officers twice her rank." But Jackson wasn't finished. "I'm sure she's very capable, sir. I just think we should be realistic about command structures and appropriate assignments. This isn't exactly a typical mission for someone at her level. Sarah took a deep breath and decided to address the comment directly. Lieutenant Commander, I appreciate your concern for mission success. My pay grade, as you put it, reflects 12 years of service, including operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and Somalia. I've led successful hostage extractions, counterterrorism operations, and reconnaissance missions that have saved countless American lives. I didn't earn my rank through politics or connections. I earned it in the field. The tension in the room was palpable. Other officers exchanged glances, some looking uncomfortable with the confrontation, others clearly interested in how it would play out. Sarah's voice remained calm and professional, but there was steel beneath her words. Jackson's face reddened slightly. I didn't mean to imply anything about your qualifications, Commander. I'm just saying that for a mission of this magnitude, we might want to consider all our options. What exactly are you suggesting? Sarah asked, her brown eyes fixed on his. Well, Jackson glanced around the room, seeming to realize he had painted himself into a corner. Maybe someone with more traditional command experience. Someone who's been in these situations before. Sarah almost smiled at the irony. You mean someone like me, who has been in exactly these situations before? Or someone like you, who has never been in combat? The room erupted in barely contained murmurs. Admiral Morrison raised his hand for silence, but his eyes showed a hint of amusement at Sarah's perfectly delivered response. Jackson's composure finally cracked. Look, I'm just trying to be practical here. This is a man's job, and we all know it. You can have all the training in the world, but when bullets start flying and lives are on the line, experience matters. Real experience. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah felt the familiar fire building in her chest, the same determination that had carried her through SEAL training when instructors told her she would never make it. The same resolve that had kept her going during her first combat deployment when fellow soldiers questioned whether she belonged there. You're absolutely right, Lieutenant Commander, Sarah said quietly. Experience does matter. Real experience. The kind that comes from actually being shot at, actually making split-second decisions that determine whether your team comes home alive. The kind that comes from earning the respect of the enemy and your allies alike. She paused and looked directly at Jackson. The kind of experience that apparently qualifies me to lead this mission, according to Admiral Morrison and the Joint Chiefs who specifically requested my team for this operation. Admiral Morrison nodded slowly. Commander Martinez is correct. This assignment came from the highest levels of command, based on her proven track record and unique qualifications for this specific type of operation. But Jackson wasn't backing down. In fact, he seemed to be digging himself deeper into the hole he had created. I understand that, sir. But surely you can see the optics of putting a woman in charge of such a high-profile mission. What message does that send to our allies? To the enemy? They're not exactly progressive when it comes to gender roles in that part of the world. Sarah's patience was wearing thin, but she maintained her professional demeanor. Lieutenant Commander, are you suggesting that we should base our military strategy on the sexist attitudes of terrorists? Because if that's the case, I have some serious concerns about your judgment. That's not what I'm saying, Jackson protested. I'm talking about practical considerations. Chain of command. Traditional structures that work. Traditional structures, Sarah repeated slowly. Like the traditional structure that kept qualified people out of combat roles based on their gender? Like the traditional structure that assumed certain people couldn't handle the pressure of command? Those traditional structures? The room was completely silent now. Even the air conditioning seemed to have stopped humming. Every eye was on the two officers facing off across the conference table. Admiral Morrison decided it was time to intervene. That's enough, he said firmly. We're here to plan a mission, not debate personnel policies. Commander Martinez will lead the operation because she is the most qualified person for the job. End of discussion. But Jackson made one final mistake. As Sarah gathered her materials and prepared to continue the briefing, he muttered under his breath, just loud enough for several people to hear, "This is what happens when political correctness takes over military decisions." Sarah stopped moving. She set down her papers and turned to face Jackson directly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Lieutenant Commander," she said, her voice deadly quiet, "would you like to repeat that comment for the record?" Jackson realized he had crossed a line, but his pride wouldn't let him back down completely. "I said this is what happens when politics influences military decisions instead of merit." "And you believe my selection for this mission is based on politics rather than merit?" "I think it's possible that other factors were considered." Sarah walked slowly around the table until she was standing directly in front of Jackson's chair. Every person in the room held their breath. "Let me make something very clear, Lieutenant Commander. My selection for this mission is based on the fact that I have successfully completed 17 high-risk extraction operations with 0 friendly casualties. It's based on my fluency in Arabic and Farsi, my knowledge of Syrian terrain, and my team's proven ability to adapt to changing circumstances in hostile environments. It's based on 12 years of exemplary service and a record that speaks for itself." She leaned slightly forward, her voice remaining calm but carrying unmistakable authority. "Your questioning of my qualifications, however, appears to be based on factors that have nothing to do with merit or experience. And, frankly, that concerns me more than any terrorist compound ever could." Jackson opened his mouth to respond, but Admiral Morrison cut him off. "Lieutenant Commander Jackson, you're dismissed from this briefing. Report to my office at 1400 hours. Jackson's face went pale. Being dismissed from a high-level briefing was a serious black mark on any officer's record. He gathered his materials quickly and headed for the door, pausing only to mutter, "This isn't over." Sarah watched him leave, then turned back to the room full of senior officers. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Admiral Morrison spoke. "Now then, Commander Martinez, let's continue with the mission planning." But, as Sarah resumed her briefing, she couldn't shake the feeling that Jackson's comment about "this isn't over" carried more weight than just wounded pride. In her 12 years of service, she had faced down enemies armed with everything from AK-47s to rocket-propelled grenades. But sometimes the most dangerous battles were fought in conference rooms and hallways, where the weapons were words and the casualties were careers. The rest of the briefing proceeded without incident. Sarah outlined her team's approach to the mission, identified potential complications, and answered detailed questions about timing and logistics. Her professionalism and expertise gradually shifted the room's atmosphere from tense to focused. As the meeting concluded, Admiral Morrison asked her to stay behind. When the room had cleared except for the two of them, he approached her with a concerned expression. "Commander, I owe you an apology for Lieutenant Commander Jackson's behavior. His comments were inappropriate and unprofessional." Sarah shook her head. "Thank you, sir, but you don't owe me an apology for his actions. I've dealt with worse." "I'm sure you have," Morrison replied. "But you shouldn't have to. Not at this level, not in this room. With respect, sir, if I let every ignorant comment derail me, I never would have made it through basic training, let alone SEAL school." Morrison studied her for a moment. "You know, I've been in the Navy for 31 years. I've seen a lot of changes, worked with a lot of exceptional officers. But I've rarely seen someone handle themselves with the grace and professionalism you showed today." "I was just doing my job, sir." "No, Commander. You were doing much more than that. You were setting an example for every person in that room about what leadership looks like under pressure." Sarah felt a flush of pride at the Admiral's words, but she also felt the weight of representation that came with being one of the few women in her position. Every mistake she made would be attributed to her gender. Every success would be questioned as political correctness. It was a burden that her male colleagues never had to carry. "Sir, about Lieutenant Commander Jackson," she began. "Don't worry about him," Morrison interrupted. "He'll be dealt with appropriately. Focus on your mission. Those hostages are counting on you and your team." As Sarah left the Pentagon that evening, she thought about the long journey that had brought her to this moment. Growing up in a small town in Texas, she had dreamed of serving her country but never imagined she would become one of the first women to complete SEAL training. The path had been grueling, filled with instructors who doubted her, fellow trainees who resented her presence, and a military culture that was slowly, reluctantly changing. But she had persevered, driven by a determination to prove that excellence had no gender. Every obstacle had made her stronger, every criticism had sharpened her resolve. Now, as she prepared for one of the most important missions of her career, she carried with her the hopes of every young girl who dreamed of serving her country without limitations. The Syrian operation would test everything she had learned about leadership, strategy, and survival. But, first, she had to survive the political battlefield of military hierarchy, where the most dangerous enemies sometimes wore the same uniform she did. As she drove home through the Virginia countryside, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from her team leader. Heard about the briefing. Jackson's an idiot. We've got your back, Commander. She smiled for the first time that day. In the end, it wasn't the approval of officers like Jackson that mattered. It was the respect of the warriors who would follow her into battle, trust her judgment, and count on her to bring them home alive. Everything else was just noise. Sarah's team assembled in the secure briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Command the following morning. The 6 men who made up SEAL Team 7's Alpha Squad were among the most elite warriors in the world, each one handpicked for their specific skills and unwavering loyalty to the mission. They had worked together for 3 years, through operations that never made the headlines but saved countless lives. Master Chief Petty Officer Marcus Bear Thompson was Sarah's second-in-command, a massive man whose intimidating presence masked a sharp tactical mind and fierce protective instincts toward his team. Petty Officer First Class David Ghostchin specialized in infiltration and surveillance, moving through enemy territory like his nickname suggested. Hospital Corpsman Second Class Miguel Doc Rodriguez served as their medic, but his combat skills were equally impressive. Petty Officer Second Class Jake Rabbit Williams handled explosives and demolitions with an artist's precision. Petty Officer Second Class Alex Titan Washington was their heavy weapons specialist and communications expert. Finally, Petty Officer Third Class Tommy Spike Morrison rounded out the team as their newest member, a sniper whose accuracy was already legendary among special operations units. "All right, listen up," Sarah began, activating the wall-mounted display screen. "We have 3 American hostages being held in this compound outside Damascus. Intelligence suggests they're being moved tomorrow night, which gives us a narrow window for extraction." She clicked through satellite images, floor plans, and guard rotation schedules. The targets are Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a pediatric surgeon, Marcus Coleman, an engineer working on water purification systems, and Rebecca Turner, a teacher who was volunteering at a local school. They've been held for 3 weeks, and their conditions are unknown. Bear studied the compound layout carefully. "What's the guard strength looking like?" "Minimum of 12 armed hostiles, possibly more. They've got lookouts on the roof, patrols around the perimeter, and at least 2 vehicles for quick escape if needed." Sarah pointed to various positions on the map. "The good news is the building is older construction, which gives us options for entry points." Ghost leaned forward, examining the structural details. "Sewage system access?" "Negative. The tunnels don't connect to this part of the city. We'll have to go through the front door, so to speak." "Or make our own door," Rabbit suggested with a grin. Sarah nodded. "That's exactly what we're going to do. But, first, we need to talk about something else." She turned to face the team, her expression serious. "Some of you may have heard about an incident at yesterday's briefing. Lieutenant Commander Jackson questioned my ability to lead this mission based on my gender. I want you to know that his opinions don't reflect the views of our command structure, and they certainly don't affect our operational readiness." The room fell silent. Sarah's team had faced this kind of prejudice before, usually from personnel who had never worked with female special operators. They had seen their commander prove herself countless times, and their loyalty to her was absolute. Bear spoke first, his deep voice carrying barely controlled anger. "Commander, with all due respect, anyone who questions your leadership abilities obviously hasn't done their homework. We've had your back for 3 years, and that's not changing now.
Damn right, added Titan. Jackson's probably never been closer to combat than a video game. His opinion doesn't mean anything to us. Doc nodded in agreement. We've been through hell together, ma'am. Gender doesn't stop bullets, and it doesn't make tactical decisions. You do.
Sarah felt a surge of gratitude for these men who had become more than teammates over the years. They were family, bound together by shared danger and mutual trust.
I appreciate that, all of you. But I need you to understand that this mission is going to be under extra scrutiny because of the controversy.
Every decision we make, every move we execute, will be analyzed by people looking for reasons to prove Jackson right. Then, we better make sure we don't give them any, Ghost said quietly. That's the plan, Sarah confirmed. We're going to execute this mission flawlessly, bring those hostages home safely, and let our results speak for themselves. The planning session continued for 6 hours, with each team member contributing their expertise to refine the operation. They studied every detail of the compound, analyzed guard patterns, and developed contingency plans for multiple scenarios. Sarah's leadership style was collaborative but decisive. She listened to input from her team while maintaining final authority over all decisions.
As the afternoon wore on, they received additional intelligence updates. The hostages were being held on the second floor of the main building, but their exact rooms were unknown. The terrorists had installed additional security measures since taking the Americans, including motion sensors and reinforced doors. This is getting more complicated, Bear observed as they reviewed the new information. Complicated is what we do, Sarah replied. Rabbit, can you get us through those reinforced doors?
Give me 10 seconds and the right tools, and I can get through anything, he answered confidently.
Doc, what's your assessment of the hostages' likely condition after 3 weeks in captivity? Doc considered the question carefully.
Depends on how they've been treated.
Dehydration, malnutrition, and psychological trauma are likely. We should be prepared for medical complications during extraction. Sarah nodded. Ghost, how close can you get us to the building without detection?
There's a blind spot on the north side where their patrol routes overlap. We can use the shadows from that burnt-out car to get within 50 meters of the wall.
Titan, what's our backup plan if things go sideways?
Fast rope extraction from the roof, or fighting withdrawal to the secondary pickup point if the building becomes compromised, he answered without hesitation.
Spike, sightlines for Overwatch?
That water tower gives me clear visibility of the entire compound.
I can provide cover for the insertion and extraction.
Sarah felt the familiar calm that came with thorough preparation. Her team was ready, the plan was solid, and the mission had a high probability of success. But she couldn't shake the feeling that they were operating under additional pressure that had nothing to do with enemy forces. That evening, as the team conducted final equipment checks, Bear approached Sarah privately.
Commander, can I speak with you for a moment?
Of course, Bear.
What's on your mind?
The big man looked uncomfortable, which was unusual for someone who faced danger without flinching.
It's about Jackson and what happened at the briefing. Sarah sighed. I thought we had settled that issue.
We did, as far as the team goes. But I'm concerned about the bigger picture.
You know, there are people in the chain of command who think like Jackson. People who are looking for any excuse to roll back the integration of women into combat roles. Sarah leaned against the equipment locker, feeling suddenly tired. I know, Bear. Trust me, I'm very aware of the political implications of this mission.
What I'm saying is, we can't afford even the smallest mistake. Not because of operational concerns, but because of the fallout that would affect every woman trying to serve in special operations.
You think I don't know that?
Sarah's voice carried a hint of frustration.
Do you think I don't feel the weight of representing every female service member every single day? Bear held up his hands. I'm not criticizing you, ma'am. You've never let that pressure affect your performance. I'm just saying the stakes are higher than usual.
Sarah studied her second-in-command's concerned face. Bear had been with her longer than anyone else on the team, and she valued his counsel.
What are you really worried about?
I'm worried that if something goes wrong on this mission, it won't matter that we've completed dozens of successful operations. It won't matter that you're one of the most decorated SEALs in the teams. All they'll remember is that a woman was in command when things went south." Sarah felt a chill at his words because she knew he was right. The burden of representation was real and constant. Every success was attributed to luck or exceptional circumstances. Every failure was seen as proof of fundamental limitations. "So what do you suggest?" she asked. "I suggest we do what we always do. We execute the mission perfectly, bring everyone home, and let the results speak for themselves. But I also suggest you prepare yourself for the fact that some people will never be satisfied, no matter how well we perform." Sarah nodded slowly. "I've been dealing with doubters my entire career, Bear. I'm not about to let them stop me now. I know you won't. That's why we follow you into hell when you ask us to." As Bear walked away, Sarah reflected on the conversation. She had always known that her career was about more than personal achievement. She was breaking barriers and opening doors for future generations of women in the military. But sometimes the weight of that responsibility felt overwhelming. Her phone buzzed with a text from Admiral Morrison, latest intelligence update attached. "Mission is a go for tomorrow night. Good hunting, Commander." Sarah opened the attachment and reviewed the final details. The terrorists were indeed planning to move the hostages, which confirmed the urgency of their operation. But there was also new information about additional security measures and the possible presence of foreign advisors among the captors. She gathered the team for one final briefing. New intelligence indicates the situation has become more complex. "We're looking at possible foreign military advisors among the hostiles, which means better training and equipment than we initially expected." "How much better?" asked Ghost. "Former special forces, potentially. We need to assume they'll have night vision, modern communications, and tactical awareness comparable to our own." The team absorbed this information without complaint. They had faced professional soldiers before and knew how to adapt their tactics accordingly. "This doesn't change our core mission," Sarah continued. "But it does mean we need to be extra careful about security and timing." "Any questions?" Rabbit raised his hand. "Rules of engagement? Protect the hostages at all costs. Minimize civilian casualties. But if you're threatened, defend yourselves and your teammates." "What about prisoner taking?" asked Titan. "Intelligence gathering is secondary to hostage extraction. If the opportunity presents itself without compromising the mission, fine. But our priority is getting those Americans home alive." Doc spoke up. "Medical protocols for the hostages? Stabilize and extract. We'll have a full medical team standing by at the extraction point. Your job is to get them to safety, not to provide field treatment unless absolutely necessary." Sarah looked around the room at her team. These men had followed her through some of the most dangerous places on Earth. They trusted her judgment and relied on her leadership. Tomorrow night, she would ask them to put their lives on the line once again. "Any other questions?" When no one responded, she continued. "Then, let's get some rest. We move out at 2,200 hours tomorrow night." As the team dispersed to their quarters, Sarah remained behind to review the mission plan one final time. Every detail had been considered, every contingency planned for. Her team was ready, and she was confident in their abilities. But she couldn't escape the knowledge that tomorrow night's mission would be judged by different standards than any operation she had previously commanded. Success would be seen as the exception rather than the rule. Failure would be attributed to fundamental flaws rather than the inherent risks of special operations. Sarah closed the mission file and headed to her quarters. Tomorrow night, she would lead 6 of America's finest warriors into battle against a determined enemy. The lives of 3 innocent Americans hung in the balance, along with the future of women in special operations. She had faced impossible odds before and emerged victorious. Tomorrow night would be no different, because failure was not an option she could afford to consider. Too many people were counting on her success, and she refused to let them down. The helicopter flew low and fast through the Syrian night, its engines muffled by specialized dampening technology that reduced its acoustic signature to barely a whisper. Sarah sat with her team in the aircraft's cargo bay, each warrior lost in final mental preparations for the mission ahead. The green glow of night vision equipment cast an eerie light over their faces as they conducted last-minute equipment checks. 5 minutes out, the pilot announced through their headsets. Sarah activated her throat microphone. Final comms check. Bear? Good to go, Commander. Ghost? Copy that. Each team member confirmed their communications equipment was functioning properly. Sarah reviewed the mission timeline one final time. Insertion at 0230 hours, building penetration by 0245, hostage location and extraction by 0315, exfiltration complete by 0330. 30 minutes from insertion to pickup, assuming everything went according to plan. But Sarah had learned during 12 years of combat operations that plans rarely survived first contact with the enemy. The compound appeared ahead of them, a collection of concrete buildings surrounded by high walls and illuminated by scattered security lights. Intelligence had been accurate about the layout, but Sarah could see additional modifications that hadn't shown up in the satellite imagery. New guard positions, additional lighting, and what appeared to be improvised explosive devices along the outer perimeter. Looks like they'd been busy, Bear observed through the team channel. Adapt and overcome, Sarah replied. Spike, you see your position? From his position near the aircraft's door, their sniper studied the water tower that would serve as his overwatch post. Roger that, Commander. Clear shot to the target building. The helicopter settled into a hover above the tower, and Spike fast roped down to his position with practiced efficiency. Within seconds, he was in place and establishing fields of fire over the entire compound. Overwatch in position, he reported. I count 6 hostiles on the perimeter, 2 more on the roof of the target building. Guard rotation appears to be every 20 minutes. Sarah checked her watch. Copy that. We insert in 90 seconds. The helicopter moved to the insertion point, a small clearing 300 meters from the compound. Sarah was first out the door, followed quickly by the rest of her team. The aircraft disappeared into the night, leaving them alone in enemy territory. Ghost took point, using his specialized skills to guide them through the darkness toward their objective. The team moved in a tactical formation that had been perfected through years of operations together, each man covering specific sectors and communicating through hand signals and whispered radio calls. Movement ahead, Ghost reported as they approached the outer perimeter. 2 guards, patrol pattern as briefed. Sarah signaled for the team to take cover behind a cluster of abandoned vehicles. Through her night vision scope, she could see the guards walking their assigned route with military precision. These weren't the undisciplined fighters they had expected to encounter. Professional bearing, proper spacing, coordinated movement, she whispered to Bear. Definitely trained soldiers. Foreign advisors, he asked. Has to be. Change of plans. We wait for the next rotation, then move during the gap. The team settled in to wait, using the time to study the compound more carefully. Sarah counted additional guard positions that hadn't appeared in their intelligence briefings. Someone had significantly upgraded the security around the hostages, which meant their captors were either expecting a rescue attempt or preparing to move them soon. Commander, Spike's voice came through their earpieces. I've got eyes on the second-floor windows. Thermal imaging shows multiple heat signatures in the northeast corner room. How many? Sarah asked. 3 stationary, 1 moving. Possible guard with the hostages. Sarah felt a mix of relief and concern. Relief that they had located their targets, concern that the security was tighter than anticipated. Copy that, Spike. Maintain overwatch. The guard rotation occurred exactly on schedule, confirming that these were indeed professional soldiers rather than typical terrorist fighters. During the brief gap in coverage, Ghost led the team forward to the compound wall. Rabbit examined the barrier carefully, looking for the best point of penetration. Concrete blocks, maybe 8 feet high.
I can blow a hole, but it'll make noise. How much noise? Sarah asked.
Enough to wake up everyone within 100 meters.
Sarah weighed their options.
A loud breach would eliminate the element of surprise but might be their only viable entry point. Going over the wall would expose them to the rooftop guards and require more time they couldn't afford to lose.
Do it, she decided. Fast and precise. We'll have maybe 60 seconds before they respond.
Rabbit placed his shaped charges with expert precision, configuring them to create a human-sized opening without bringing down the entire wall section.
30 seconds, he reported. Sarah positioned her team for immediate entry. Remember, once we're inside, speed is everything.
Ghost and Bear, clear the ground floor. Titan and Doc, secure the stairs.
Rabbit, you're with me on the hostages. Questions?
Negative, Commander, came the unified response.
Execute.
The explosive charges detonated with a muffled thump that sent chunks of concrete flying in all directions. Before the dust had settled, Sarah's team was through the breach and moving toward the building. Their synchronized movement was a thing of beauty, 6 warriors operating as a single deadly organism.
Shouting erupted from multiple directions as the compound's defenders realized they were under attack. Muzzle flashes appeared at windows and doorways as automatic weapons opened fire. Sarah's team responded with precise, disciplined shooting that neutralized threats without wasting ammunition.
Ghost and Bear reached the building's main entrance first, finding it heavily fortified with steel reinforcement and multiple locks.
Fortified portal, Bear reported. Gonna need explosives. Negative, Sarah replied. Too much noise, too much time. Look for alternate entry.
While her team searched for another way into the building, Sarah noticed movement on the rooftop above them.
Spike, we've got problems up top.
I see them, the sniper replied.
2 hostiles moving toward the roof access. They're trying to reach the hostages from above.
Sarah realized their carefully planned timeline was falling apart. The defenders were responding faster and more professionally than anticipated, and they were running out of time before reinforcements arrived.
Ghost, status on alternate entry? Found a service entrance on the south side. Single lock, standard door. Move.
Bear, cover R6. Titan, Doc, stay on the stairs once we're inside. The team flowed toward the service entrance like water finding the path of least resistance. Ghost had the door open in 30 seconds, revealing a dark corridor that led toward the center of the building.
Sarah checked her watch, 0252 hours.
They were already 7 minutes behind schedule, and they hadn't even reached the hostages yet.
Spike, what's the situation on the roof? Hostiles have secured roof access.
I can't get clear shots without risk of hitting friendlies below. That meant the enemy soldiers could reach the second floor through internal stairs, potentially beating Sarah's team to the hostages. She made a command decision that would either save the mission or doom it completely.
Change of plans.
Bear, Titan, secure the ground floor and prevent enemy reinforcement. Ghost, Doc, with me.
We're going straight up.
Commander, that puts us in a potential crossfire if understood, Bear.
Execute.
Sarah led Ghost and Doc up the narrow staircase toward the second floor. Each step brought them closer to their objective but also deeper into potential danger. At the top of the stairs, she found a hallway with multiple doors leading to various rooms.
Doc, cover the rear. Ghost, take point.
We clear each room systematically until we find our people. The first room contained nothing but old furniture and debris. The second was empty except for prayer rugs and religious texts. The third room's door was reinforced with steel plating and secured with multiple locks.
This is it, Sarah whispered.
Ghost began working on the locks while Sarah and Doc maintained security in both directions. Gunfire erupted from the floor below as Bear and Titan engaged enemy forces trying to reach the stairs.
Commander, we've got multiple hostiles on the ground floor, Bear reported. They're organized and well-equipped. This isn't going to hold them long. Copy that. Ghost, how long? Almost got it, there.
The door swung open to reveal 3 Americans bound and gagged in the corner of a small, dirty room. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, Marcus Coleman, and Rebecca Turner looked up at their rescuers with a mixture of hope and disbelief.
United States Navy, Sarah announced quietly. We're here to take you home.
Doc immediately began medical assessments while Sarah and Ghost cut the hostages' restraints.
All 3 Americans appeared physically weak but alert and responsive. Can you walk? Sarah asked Dr. Walsh.
Yes, she replied, her voice hoarse from dehydration.
We can all walk. Good. We need to move fast.
Stay close, do exactly what we tell you, and we'll get you out of here safely.
Sarah activated her throat microphone. Package secured. 3 ambulatory. Beginning extraction.
Copy that, Commander, Bear replied. But we've got problems down here. They've called for backup, and I can hear vehicles approaching.
Sarah's mind raced through their options.
The original extraction plan called for exiting through the same route they had used for entry. But, with enemy reinforcements approaching and organized resistance on the ground floor, that path was no longer viable.
Spike, what's the status on the roof access? Clear for now.
The hostiles I saw earlier have moved back down into the building. Sarah made another command decision.
New extraction plan. We're going up instead of down. Spike, can you provide cover for a roof pickup? Affirmative, Commander. I've got good fields of fire on all approaches. Bear, Titan, can you hold your positions for another 10 minutes?
We'll hold as long as you need, ma'am. Sarah turned to the rescued hostages.
Change of plans. We're going to the roof for pickup.
It means climbing more stairs, but it's safer than trying to fight our way back down.
The 3 Americans nodded their understanding.
Despite their physical condition after 3 weeks of captivity, they were determined to do whatever was necessary to reach safety. Ghost led the way up another staircase to the roof access.
The metal door was secured from the inside, but a few swift kicks forced it open.
Syrian night air rushed in, carrying the sounds of intensifying gunfire from below and the approaching engines of enemy vehicles.
Extraction team, this is Team 7, Sarah called into her radio. We need immediate dust-off from the roof of the target building. Package secured, but we're taking heavy fire. Copy that, Team 7. Inbound in 8 minutes. Can you hold? Sarah looked around the rooftop, assessing their defensive position.
The roof offered good visibility but limited cover. If enemy forces reached their floor before the helicopter arrived, they would be trapped with nowhere to retreat.
We'll hold, she replied, though she wasn't entirely certain they could keep that promise.
Doc was helping the hostages find positions behind the rooftop's low parapet wall.
Ghost had taken up a firing position covering the roof access door.
Sarah checked her ammunition and prepared for what could be their final stand.
Bear, status report?
Still holding the ground floor, but barely. These guys are good, Commander.
Real good. We're burning through ammo fast. Copy. Extraction inbound in 7 minutes. Hold until then. Roger that. Sarah looked at the 3 Americans they had risked everything to save.
Dr. Walsh was talking quietly to her fellow hostages, probably explaining their medical conditions to help Doc prioritize treatment. Marcus Coleman kept checking the roof access door, ready to help defend their position despite having no combat training.
Rebecca Turner was holding Doc's medical supplies, making herself useful however she could.
These were good people, innocent civilians who had dedicated their lives to helping others. They deserved to see their families again, and Sarah was determined to make that happen. The sound of helicopter rotors grew louder in the distance, but so did the gunfire from inside the building. Enemy forces were getting closer to the roof, and time was running out.
Ghost, what do you think? Sarah asked.
I think we're about to find out what we're really made of, he replied grimly.
Footsteps echoed from the stairwell below.
Their enemies had reached the upper floors and would be on the roof within minutes.
Sarah checked her watch, 5 minutes until extraction. 5 minutes to hold against professional soldiers while protecting 3 civilians on an exposed rooftop. 5 minutes that would determine whether this mission ended in triumph or tragedy.
Sarah raised her weapon and prepared to find out.
The helicopter thundered overhead as Sarah's team held their position on the rooftop.
Enemy soldiers had reached the roof access but were being held back by Ghost's precise defensive fire and Spike's sniper cover from the water tower. The rescued hostages huddled behind the concrete parapet, protected but aware that their lives hung in the balance of the next few minutes.
30 seconds to extraction, the pilot announced through Sarah's earpiece. Below them, the sounds of combat intensified as Bear and Titan fought to prevent enemy reinforcements from reaching the roof.
Sarah could hear the distinctive crack of AK-47 rounds mixed with the measured response of American weapons. Her team was professional, disciplined, and deadly effective, but they were outnumbered and running low on ammunition. "Ghost, ammo status," she called out. "2 magazines left," he replied while changing positions to avoid return fire.
"Copy that."
"Doc, get the hostages ready for immediate extraction." Doc helped Dr. Walsh, Marcus Coleman, and Rebecca Turner prepare for helicopter pickup.
Despite their weakened condition, all 3 Americans showed remarkable courage under fire.
Dr. Walsh was even helping Doc with basic medical assessments of her fellow hostages. The extraction helicopter settled into position above the rooftop, its crew chief preparing to deploy the rescue harness. Sarah knew they would have only moments to get everyone aboard before enemy forces overwhelmed their position.
"Commander," Spike reported from his overwatch position, "I've got multiple vehicle loads of reinforcements approaching from the east. You need to move now."
Sarah made the hardest decision a leader can make. She had to trust her team to hold their positions while she focused on getting the hostages to safety. "Ghost, cover the extraction."
"Doc, get our people on that bird." The next 3 minutes were chaos.
Enemy soldiers reached the roof access and began pouring through the doorway, only to meet devastating fire from Ghost's position.
Spike's sniper rifle cracked repeatedly from the water tower, each shot finding its target with surgical precision.
Below, Bear and Titan's voices could be heard calling out tactical information as they fought a running battle through the building's corridors.
One by one, the hostages were lifted to safety.
Dr. Walsh went first, followed by Marcus Coleman, and, finally, Rebecca Turner. As the 3rd American disappeared into the helicopter's cargo bay, Sarah felt a surge of relief mixed with determination. Phase 1 was complete, but they still had to extract her entire team safely. "Package delivered," she reported to the pilot. "Now we need pickup for 6 SEALs."
"Copy that, Commander." Repositioning for team extraction.
But, as the helicopter moved to a new position, enemy fire intensified dramatically. Rocket-propelled grenades began exploding around the rooftop, and Sarah realized their situation had become critical. The enemy forces weren't just trying to recapture the hostages anymore, they were trying to kill the rescue team.
"Spike, can you suppress those RPG positions?" "Working on it, Commander." "But there are too many targets."
Sarah looked around the rooftop at Ghost's determined face as he continued to hold the access point against overwhelming odds. Doc had taken up a firing position and was contributing to their defense despite his primary role as a medic. Below, she could still hear Bear and Titan fighting, but their radio communications had become sporadic. "Bear, status report." Static filled her earpiece for several seconds before Bear's voice came through, strained but steady. "Still here, Commander."
"Titan took some shrapnel, but he's mobile." "We're falling back to the stairwell."
Sarah felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Titan was wounded, which meant their team's combat effectiveness was degraded at the worst possible moment. She had to make another command decision that could determine whether they all made it home alive.
"New plan," she announced. "Doc, you're going up first.
Treat Titan's wounds on the helicopter and prepare for possible additional casualties."
"Commander, I should be the last one out," Doc protested. "That's an order, corpsman. We need you functional for medical support." Doc reluctantly moved to the extraction point as the helicopter returned.
Sarah watched him disappear into the aircraft, knowing she had just sent away one of her most capable fighters to ensure medical support for the rest of her team. Ghost, fall back to my position. We'll hold together until Bear and Titan reach the roof. Ghost bounded across the rooftop under heavy fire, reaching Sarah's position just as enemy soldiers began emerging from the roof access in greater numbers. The two SEALs worked together with practiced efficiency, their combined firepower creating a deadly crossfire that temporarily stopped the enemy advance. Commander, Bear's voice crackled through the radio, we're on our way up, but Titan's moving slow.
We could use some cover on the stairs. Sarah looked at Ghost, and they both understood what needed to happen.
Someone had to go back into the building to help their wounded teammate, which would leave the extraction point vulnerable to enemy assault.
Ghost, you're faster than me. Go help Bear get Titan up those stairs. I'll hold the roof.
Ghost hesitated for a split second, understanding that Sarah was essentially ordering him to leave her alone against multiple enemy soldiers.
Commander, that's go. That's an order.
Ghost sprinted toward the stairwell, disappearing into the building to help evacuate their wounded teammate. Sarah found herself alone on the rooftop except for the approaching helicopter and an unknown number of enemy soldiers fighting their way toward her position. She had been in similar situations before during her 12 years of service, but never with so much at stake. The success of this mission would determine not just the fate of 3 rescued hostages, but potentially the future of women in special operations.
Lieutenant Commander Jackson's words echoed in her mind, this is a man's job. Sarah smiled grimly and adjusted her grip on her weapon.
She was about to show Jackson and everyone else exactly what a woman could do when her back was against the wall. The first enemy soldier appeared at the roof access, weapon raised and ready to fire.
Sarah's shot took him down before he could squeeze the trigger.
The second and third soldiers tried to advance together, using teamwork to overwhelm her position. Sarah's training and experience allowed her to engage both targets simultaneously, her accuracy honed by thousands of hours of practice.
Spike, I need some help up here, she called out. On it, Commander. Keep their heads down.
Spike's sniper fire began picking off enemy soldiers as they tried to establish positions on the rooftop. His accuracy was phenomenal, but Sarah knew he couldn't cover every angle simultaneously. She had to keep moving, using the rooftop's limited cover to avoid becoming an easy target.
Commander, Bear's voice came through her earpiece, we're almost to the roof. 30 seconds. Copy that. Extraction Bird, we need immediate pickup once my team reaches the roof. Standing by, Commander.
Sarah heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Bear supporting Titan as they emerged from the stairwell. Ghost followed close behind, providing rear security. Titan's left shoulder was bloody, but he was still carrying his weapon and moving under his own power.
About time you guys showed up, Sarah said with relief. Wouldn't miss the party, Titan replied through gritted teeth.
The helicopter moved into position for final extraction. Sarah organized her team for pickup, with Titan going first due to his wounds, followed by Ghost and Bear. She would be last out, maintaining security until everyone else was safely aboard.
As Titan was lifted to the helicopter, enemy soldiers made one final assault on their position.
Sarah and her remaining teammates fought with everything they had, knowing that failure now would mean capture or death for the entire team.
Ghost, go!
Sarah shouted as the extraction harness came down again.
Ghost hesitated, unwilling to leave his commander behind. Together or not at all. That's an order. Go! Ghost reluctantly grabbed the harness and was lifted away.
Now only Sarah and Bear remained on the increasingly dangerous rooftop. Enemy soldiers were advancing from multiple directions, and their ammunition was running critically low.
Bear, you're next, Sarah ordered. Negative, Commander. I don't leave my team leader behind.
Sarah knew there was no time to argue. The enemy was closing in, and they had perhaps 30 seconds before their position was completely overrun. She made one final command decision.
Together then. We go up on the same harness. Bear nodded grimly. Together.
The extraction harness descended one last time as Sarah and Bear fought off the final enemy assault. Spike's sniper fire provided crucial cover as they grabbed the rescue line together. As they were lifted toward safety, Sarah looked down at the rooftop where she had just fought the most intense battle of her career. The helicopter banked away from the compound, carrying 7 American warriors and 3 rescued civilians toward friendly territory. As they flew through the Syrian night, Sarah finally allowed herself to believe that the mission had been successful.
All personnel accounted for, she reported to Mission Control.
Package delivered safely.
Team 7 returning to base.
Outstanding work, Team 7, came the reply. You've got some very relieved families waiting to welcome those hostages home. Sarah looked around the helicopter's cargo bay at her team.
Doc was treating Titan's wounds with professional efficiency. Ghost was conducting post-mission equipment checks.
Bear was monitoring radio traffic for any signs of pursuit. Spike was cleaning his rifle with the methodical precision that had made him such an effective sniper. The 3 rescued Americans were sleeping, exhausted by their ordeal but, finally, safe. Dr. Walsh had thanked Sarah repeatedly during the flight, tears streaming down her face as she realized she would see her family again. Marcus Coleman had shaken hands with every member of the team, speechless with gratitude.
Rebecca Turner had simply whispered thank you over and over.
As the helicopter crossed into friendly airspace, Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The mission had been successful, her team was intact, and 3 innocent Americans were going home to their families.
Everything else was just politics and noise.
But she knew that the real test would come when they returned to base. The success of this mission would be analyzed, critiqued, and judged by people who had never faced enemy fire or made life-or-death decisions in hostile territory.
Lieutenant Commander Jackson and others like him would find ways to diminish their accomplishment or attribute it to luck rather than skill. Sarah didn't care.
She had proven to herself and her team that leadership, courage, and tactical excellence had nothing to do with gender. The only thing that mattered was bringing everyone home alive, and she had done exactly that. 3 hours later, Sarah stood in the Pentagon briefing room where this entire adventure had begun. Admiral Morrison was there, along with several other senior officers and civilian officials. The 3 rescued hostages had been reunited with their families and were receiving medical treatment at Walter Reed Hospital. Commander Martinez, Admiral Morrison began, on behalf of the United States military and the families of the hostages you rescued, I want to express our gratitude for your exceptional performance during this operation.
Thank you, sir.
My team performed magnificently under difficult circumstances.
Yes, they did.
But leadership makes the difference between a good team and an exceptional one.
Your tactical decisions, your ability to adapt under pressure, and your courage under fire exemplified the highest traditions of the Navy SEALs.
Sarah felt a flush of pride at the Admiral's words, but she remained focused on her team's collective achievement rather than individual recognition.
Sir, I would like to commend my entire team for their professionalism and dedication.
Master Chief Thompson's tactical leadership, Hospital Corpsman Rodriguez's medical expertise, Petty Officers Chen, Williams, Washington, and Morrison's specialized skills, they all contributed to the mission's success.
Admiral Morrison nodded. Their performance has been noted and will be reflected in their service records. But right now, I want to talk about your future, Commander. Sarah wasn't sure what he meant. Sir? How would you feel about a promotion to captain and assignment as the commanding officer of SEAL Team 6?
Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. SEAL Team 6 was the most elite special operations unit in the world, responsible for the most sensitive and dangerous missions. To be offered command of that unit was the highest honor any special operations officer could receive. Sir, I would be honored to accept that assignment. Good. Because after what happened here tonight, and, more importantly, how you handled Lieutenant Commander Jackson's inappropriate comments, I think it's time we had more leaders like you in positions of real authority. As if summoned by the mention of his name, Lieutenant Commander Jackson appeared in the doorway of the briefing room. Sarah noticed that he looked considerably less confident than he had during their previous encounter.
Admiral Morrison, Jackson said tentatively, "You asked to see me?" "Yes, Lieutenant Commander." "Please come in." Jackson entered the room and immediately noticed Sarah's presence. His expression showed a mixture of surprise and discomfort. "Commander Martinez has just successfully completed one of the most difficult hostage rescue operations in recent memory," Admiral Morrison announced. "3 American civilians are alive today because of her leadership and the exceptional performance of her team." Jackson's face went pale. That's excellent news, sir." "Indeed it is. Now, Lieutenant Commander, I believe you owe Commander Martinez an apology for your inappropriate comments during the mission briefing." The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Sarah watched Jackson struggle with his pride, his prejudices, and his career prospects. She felt no satisfaction in his obvious discomfort, only a hope that he might learn something from this experience. "Commander Martinez," Jackson began slowly, "I owe you an apology. My comments about your qualifications and abilities were inappropriate and unprofessional. They were based on prejudice rather than facts, and they had no place in a military briefing." Sarah studied his face, looking for signs of genuine remorse rather than just career preservation. "Thank you, Lieutenant Commander. Apology accepted." Furthermore, Jackson continued, surprising everyone in the room, "I want to acknowledge that your successful completion of this mission proves that excellence in leadership has nothing to do with gender." "I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Admiral Morrison nodded approvingly. "Lieutenant Commander, you'll be reassigned to a position where you can learn more about respect and professionalism. I suggest you use this opportunity to become a better officer." As Jackson left the room, Sarah reflected on how much had changed in just 3 days. She had gone from being questioned about her basic qualifications to being offered command of the military's most elite unit. More importantly, she had proven to herself and others that courage, skill, and leadership were what truly mattered in combat. "Commander," Admiral Morrison said after Jackson had gone, "there's one more thing. When news of this mission becomes public, and it will eventually, you're going to become a symbol for women in the military. That's a responsibility you didn't ask for, but it comes with your accomplishments." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "I understand, sir. I've been carrying that responsibility my entire career." "I know you have. And you've carried it with distinction." As Sarah left the Pentagon that morning, she thought about the long journey that had brought her to this moment. From a small town in Texas to the most dangerous places on Earth, she had never stopped believing that excellence was gender neutral. She had faced down enemies armed with everything from rifles to rockets, but sometimes the most difficult battles were fought in conference rooms against prejudice and assumption. Her phone buzzed with messages from her team. Bear was proud of their success and looking forward to their next mission together. Doc reported that Titan was recovering well and would be back to full duty within a month. Ghost, in his typically succinct style, simply wrote, "Outstanding leadership, Commander." But the message that meant the most came from Spike, their youngest team member. "Thank you for showing us what real leadership looks like. Proud to serve under your command." Sarah smiled as she read his words. This was why she had endured the doubters, the critics, and the people who thought she didn't belong. This was why she had pushed herself through training that broke lesser people, why she had volunteered for the most dangerous missions, why she had never given up when others said she wasn't good enough. Not for the promotions or the medals or the recognition, but for the young warriors who would come after her. For the girls who dreamed of serving their country without limitations. For the future where excellence would be measured by character and capability rather than gender. As Sarah drove home through the Virginia countryside, she thought about tomorrow. There would be new missions, new challenges, and new opportunities to prove that honor, courage, and commitment knew no gender. She was ready for whatever came next, secure in the knowledge that she had earned her place among America's finest warriors. The war room where this story began had seen many salutes over the years, but none more meaningful than the one that would soon come. When Admiral Morrison announced her promotion to captain and assignment to SEAL Team 6, every officer in that room would stand and salute, not because she was a woman who had overcome obstacles, but because she was a warrior who had proven her worth in the crucible of combat.
And, in that moment, Sarah knew that Lieutenant Commander Jackson's joke about her rank had backfired completely. Instead of diminishing her authority, his prejudice had provided her with the opportunity to demonstrate the very qualities that made great leaders: courage under pressure, grace in the face of adversity, and the determination to succeed when others expected failure. The salute would come not because of her gender, but because of her honor. And that made all the difference.